William Blake, 1757 to 1827. He was a painter, engraver, poet, and imaginative genius of a unique kind. Engraving was his chosen means of earning a living. He started as an apprentice to an artist making drawings of monuments in Westminster Abbey, thus acquiring early a deep feeling for medieval art. Michelangelo seems to have made an influence in his style. The Songs of Innocence was the first of many beautiful works written by him but never set up in type and commercially published. Text and its decoration were etched in relief and colored by hand, his devoted wife Catherine helping him, the effect being comparable with that of medieval illumination, but with its own freshness and originality of design. There followed the long series of prophetic and poetic books, culminating in the strange, powerful, and visually beautiful Jerusalem. His later years produced his greatest works. He painted in both watercolor and a modification of tempera. In pure watercolor he achieved the final triumph of his designs for the Divina Commedia. He had a consistent view of art as imaginative expression and not imitation. His creations were superb. Many of his time thought he had an unbalanced mind to produce what he did. The truth of the matter is, he was truly an original, years ahead of his time. Songs of Innocence. In this tiny volume, Blake used a relief etching method of his own devising. This enabled him to achieve a close unity between each poem and the surrounding design. Often the effect is reminiscent of a medieval manuscript. The simple lyrics and idyllic sentiments have made it one of his most popular works. It concentrates on children and the gentler aspects of the natural world. Europe, a Prophecy, The Ancient Days. This deals with the upheavals of Blake's own time. In Europe, the troubles are traced back to the misunderstanding of the true message of Christianity. Under the influence of the harsh law-giving deity Urizen, Europe develops a repressive and materialistic society that eventually provokes the French Revolution. Blake shows Urizen measuring the material world. Elohim creating Adam. A most severe interpretation of the creation of man. Elohim, Hebrew for God, is shown here as a terrifying stone-like figure, virtually dragging the protesting form of man from the world of the spirit into the enslavement of mortality. Nebuchadnezzar, the biblical account of the Babylonian king who went insane after persecuting the Jews. Blake has responded to the description of Daniel 4 of how the king became as an animal, eating grass like an oxen, his hair growing like eagle's feathers, and his nails like bird's claws. He represents a man devoid of spiritual vision. It also shows a full use of rich textures and flickering light effects that the monoprint method could produce to create a doom-laden atmosphere. The Great Red Dragon and the Woman Clothed with the Sun. This watercolor illustrates the opening verses of Revelation 12, which describes a great red dragon waiting for the woman clothed with the sun to devour the child as she about to give birth to. According to tradition, the dragon is worldly power, and the woman Israel, oppressed in her innocence by the wicked. Adam naming the beasts. Painted in tempera, the figure is emphasized with strong hand gestures. Here Adam indicates the good animals of creation with his right hand, while covering the evil serpent with his left. Book of Job, when the morning stars sang together. The Old Testament story of Job, the man who obeyed the Lord but was still beset by misfortune, fascinated Blake throughout his life. Around 1805 to 1810, he made a series of carefully worked up watercolors on the theme which were later to form the basis of the Book of Engravings of 1825. This is one of the finest of the design. It shows Job's mystical awareness of the workings of the universe after the Lord, shown here in the center, had revealed himself. This corresponds to the fourfold nature of man. The lowest section represents the flesh, where Job and his companions sit. The sun god Apollo, middle left, represents the intellect. Opposite is the moon, who stands for feeling. The choir of angels above symbolizes the spirit. John Constable, 1776 to 1837, one of the greatest landscape painters, the son of a country miller. Employed as a youth in the family mill, he developed slowly as an artist. At age 23 he began to study at the Royal Academy schools, and 35 when his Dedham Vale first showed his striking originality. In his long formative period, two main factors can be found. First, the study and assimilation of what had been achieved in landscape painting by Ruysdael, Rubens, and Gainsborough, and second, a love of nature, as represented by the unobstructed cloud panorama, the flat lands, streams, water, meadows, and cornfields of his native countryside. He was essentially an artist of the lowlands and scenes of a modestly rural kind. The self-imposed limitation distinguishes him from his contemporary, of nearly the same age, Turner. Constable is typical of the Romantic period in which he lived. It was the return to nature and the study of natural phenomena which followed after the stresses of war and revolution. His finished works were preceded by large preparatory paintings in which his freshness of handling, technical freedom, and audacity in the use of broken color are more apparent. His watercolors are mainly preparatory studies for oils. In England, the immediate influence of his genius was practically nil. In France, on the other hand, it was a revelation inspiring to the landscape school of the 1830s, while Impressionism has in him its great forerunner. Boat building. This was painted entirely outdoors. This picture is proof that in landscape, what painters call warm colors are not necessary to produce a warm effect. There is much gray and green in it, but such is its atmospheric truth that the heated air near the ground seems visible. This perfect work remained in Constable's possession to the end of his life. Maria Bicknell, Mrs. John Constable. Constable hated portrait painting, but here he paints his wife to be. He felt it was too personal for showing. Maria sat many times during their marriage, and these portraits are a record of the gradual fading of her beauty due to the relentless attacks of illness. He must have felt somewhat guilty of hastening her death due to the almost constant pregnancies. After her death, he wrote this heartbreaking sentence: "I seem now for the first time to know the value of the being I once possessed." Flatford Mill. When Constable applied for membership in the Royal Academy, he was told his pictures lacked finish. Bearing in mind the criticism, he worked over Flatford Mill until, in the words of one of his critics, it now displays the most labored finish. For our modern taste, this comes very close to a colored photograph. Clouds and cloud study. Constable did considerable study of clouds. From his studies, annotations, meteorologists could determine the general condition of the weather, of which the clouds depicted were a sign. His clouds are not pasted against the sky. They have sky behind them. They have volume and occupy definite space. They are more convincing and real than those of other painters. Salisbury Cathedral from the Bishop's Grounds. Constable managed to represent precise architectural details while still capturing an atmospheric moment, as he always tried to do in his work. He said of this painting, "It was the most difficult subject in landscape I ever had on my easel." The Cornfield. Here Constable pays homage to the lush farmlands where he grew up. In this picture there's a sense of light and shadow. The light hitting the trees on the left and the shadows directly on the path on the trees, smaller trees on the right. Dedham Vale. Greatness of the painting lies in his mastery of broken light. Billowy clouds adorn one of the loveliest skies in art. The picture itself is full of minute detail. In the far background you can see a lake, a church tower from a little town, open fields. As you come closer to the forefront, what looks like a mill or small farm with a river running right in front of it. And then you get to the trees with the light hitting it and the different shades that it shows, and the dark little gully or ravine right in the middle of the forefront. Salisbury Cathedral from the Meadows. One of Constable's greatest masterpieces. Here Salisbury Cathedral can be interpreted as representing the whole Christian church. A storm has passed by, but religion has withstood the whirlwind, as Constable predicted it would, and the rainbow offers a hope for the future. His painting is an apocalyptic version of a triumph in Christianity. Constable worshipped nature, not as a pagan, but as a deeply religious man. Thus the picture as a symbolic level stands for an invincible church, and at the descriptive level depicts the transformation of nature following a storm. The lines quoted from Thomson's Summer in the catalogue of the Royal Academy Exhibition of 1831 refer to dangers past and joy to come. As from the face of heaven the scattered clouds tumultuous rove in intermal sky, sublimer swells, and o'er the world expands a purer azure. Through the lighted air, a lighter luster and a cleaner calm, diffusive tremble while as if in sign of danger past, a glittering robe of joy, set off abundant by the yellow ray, invests the fields, and nature smiles revived. Thomas Gainsborough, 1727 to 1788, an eminent equally in portrait and landscape, the son of a woolen manufacturer. He first studied under a French engraver. At 19 he married a girl who brought him a moderate income. When he first worked as a painter, he copied and restored Dutch paintings, which greatly helped him to form his view of landscape. His pastoral portraits show his originality. He was busy painting commission portraits when he saw Van Dyck portraits in some of the great houses. His refinement of style and silvery color as seen in his Blue Boy is in every way a homage to Van Dyck. The landscapes he painted for his own pleasure took on an imaginary look, beautiful in rhythmic movement. As a foundation member of the Royal Academy and election to its council, his prestige was growing. He became the chief rival of Sir Joshua Reynolds in portraiture. Complaining often of the enforced labor of face painting, he never failed to give of his best to portraits, showing his sense of character and great elegance of style. In landscape influenced by Rubens, he produced the splendid massing and play of light. Hundreds of drawings, often in a mixture of media, show his continued pursuit of landscape for its own sake. Gainsborough was also something of a musician. The sense of rhythm and the sensitive, fluent touches of his color are indeed musical. Thomas Gainsborough, his wife and daughter. The group portrait of his family reveals his major interests at the time he painted it. The rich fabrics, the billowing gown, the elegant but informal pose, all reflect the influence of French painters whose work he admired in London. In the lacy foliage and hazy mass of trees, he reveals his own developing style of treating landscape. The painter's daughters teasing a cat. Gainsborough showed his feelings in painting the people he loved. Here we see a portrait of his daughters, Mary and Margaret. He didn't bother to finish the portrait because it wasn't for sale. You can barely see it, but there is a cat that has only an outline on the lap of the younger girl. The girls are shown as solemn, unsmiling. They were troubled girls who grew to be unstable women. The older Margaret later went insane. Mr. and Mrs. Andrews. The picture is as much a portrait of the Andrews rolling farmland as it is of the young couple, but the artist has caught the sitters perfectly. The bland-faced new husband tries to look as nonchalant as an experienced lord of the manor. His pretty wife sits with a firm and steady gaze, suggesting a forceful character behind her girlish facade. Cornard Wood, often called Gainsborough's forest. The most evident qualities are his skill at conveying the atmosphere of hot summer tranquility and the precise depiction of a profusion of natural details, leaves, twigs, grasses, clouds. This was an imaginary place to Gainsborough. The Blue Boy. This was Gainsborough's best-known work and the most popular picture in English art. It is not known for sure, but the sitter was probably Jonathan Butel, the teenage son of a rich London hardware dealer. Dressed in the style of the earlier Dutch, this is a homage to Van Dyck, whom Gainsborough admired. This is a detailed picture from The Woodcutter Courting a Milkmaid. A patch of bright sun illuminates a pastoral flirtation as a woodman distracts a pretty farm girl, while her old cow stands patiently by. The Morning Walk. A pair of 21-year-old newlyweds out for a morning stroll, as soft breezes stir the greenery, personify the elusive charm of upper-class 18th century England. Among Gainsborough's marriage portraits, this is perhaps the most beautiful. Mrs. Richard Brinsley Sheridan. Described by an admiring bishop as a connecting link between woman and angel, Elizabeth Ann Linley was the daughter of a music teacher at Bath. Gainsborough, who knew her as a child, was one of the many who loved to hear her sing. She is said to have given her first recital at the age of 12, and at 19 she was performing before the king and fashionable audiences. Her beauty attracted many men, whose advances she rebuffed, but in 1772 she eloped with the playwright Richard Brinsley Sheridan. She forswore nearly all public appearances to look after the accounts of the Drury Lane Theatre, managed by her husband, and she shared his devotion to politics, campaigning actively for the Whig Party. Gainsborough depicted her as serious, but also relaxed, as if she had just pulled off her hat and plopped down under a tree in the countryside. Detail, close-up, Mrs. Richard Brinsley Sheridan. Sir Joshua Reynolds, 1723 to 1792. Portrait painter, the son of a minister, he spent 3 years as an apprentice in London. A turning point came in his career when he spent 3 years in Italy. While painting portraits of visitors, he made an intelligent and careful study of the Renaissance art in Rome and Venice. From this study, he infused into his own painting the dignity which distinguishes it from others. He settled in London, and he became the most eminent portrait painter of his day. With the formation of the Royal Academy in 1768, he was the first and greatest of its presidents. He was knighted in 1769 and became printer in ordinary to George III, though never enjoying so much royal favor as Gainsborough. Yet the procession of aristocratic sitters to his studio was endless. Portraits of men of letters are among his best. Children, too, have a special place in his work. While he is less noted for his portraits of women, he did paint several of them with a masterpiece of charm. He was also noted for his teaching, nurturing a future class of English painters. He is justly regarded as a leader and formative power of the English school. Captain the Honorable John Hamilton. This was the first picture to bring the artist some measure of fame. Captain Hamilton was shown in either a coat of fox or wolf fur. He is painted with a mustache and facial hair, which was not worn in 18th century except by some regiments on the continent. Hamilton was a sailor whose career at sea was quite adventuresome. On December 18, 1755, he drowned when the boat in which he was going ashore from a ship overturned. Mrs. Abington as Miss Prue. At this time a portrait of a female leaning over the back of a chair with a thumb in her mouth would have been considered improper, but here she is playing the part of a wanton rural woman in the play Love for Love. Fanny Barton, which originally was named Mrs. Abington, was born in poverty. She started as a flower seller turned prostitute. She later became an actress of great popularity after she married James Abington, her music master. But she was educated by her lover, an unknown member of Parliament. London fashion was set by her stage costumes, and Reynolds did 3 portraits of her. Master Crewe as Henry VIII. Here we see the humor and satire on the part of Reynolds. He reproduces a picture Holbein did of a swaggering Henry VIII, but this time he uses a mocking replica of a friend's little son. Miss Crewe. The subject is supposed to be Frances Crewe, the sister of the previous picture. This was to be a companion picture aside of her brothers, but it is actually left undone, for the sitter died before completion at age 8. Self-portrait, Sir Joshua Reynolds, DCL. In this self-portrait, Reynolds paints himself with a Rembrandt likeness, who was one of his great influences. Lady Worsley, one of Reynolds' most spectacular female portraits. Ladies had been painted in riding costumes since the 17th century, but rarely with so powerful an effect of pure color, the deep warm red perfectly set off by the cooler green-brown landscape. Penelope Boothby, or the Mop Cap. One of Reynolds' most successful child portraits, original in conception and brilliance in execution. It is for the most part thinly painted in a technique learned from Rubens, as we can see from such details as shadowy areas around eyelids and nostrils. Like Goya, he makes effective use of black and white. Less than 3 years after the sitting, Penelope died. Dante Gabriel Rossetti, 1828 to 1882, painter and poet, son of an Italian exile. His art training is of little account, but his poetic gift and love of medievalism were important factors in the pre-Raphaelitism of which he is a founder. The pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood was a reaction against the triviality of earlier Victorian academic art. It is based partly on the doctrine of truth to nature and partly on the idea of the return to pre-Renaissance ideas. The movement did not last long, but had immense influence. The early pictures, painted with great minuteness of detail and brilliance of color, aroused the enthusiasm of many followers and added realism to the art of the 1850s. Rossetti's early paintings already show mystical feeling as well as a sense of design. His best works are the watercolors of the 1850s, in which, unhampered by the technical demands of oil, he recreated the glow of medieval illumination. To this achievement must be added the beautiful series of drawings of Miss Siddall, whom he married in 1860. After her death he was a haunted man. He was tortured by remorse and insomnia, and became increasingly dependent on drugs and alcohol. His bohemian lifestyle was a legend in itself. As time went on, Rossetti became more eccentric and recluse, seeing a few close friends and patrons. After being attacked in a notorious pamphlet, he suffered from persecution mania and even attempted suicide. In his last years he met Jane Morris, the wife of a former pupil. Her marriage was bad, and soon they found increasing solace in each other. They had a despairing kind of love affair, and one of the strangest artist-model relationships in art history. As his health and mental state grew worse, his love and dependency for Jane became an obsession. He drew and painted her continually. By 1878, he stopped painting and became a permanent invalid, consuming an appalling amount of drugs. He died paralyzed and partially deaf at age 54. Self-portrait. Done at age 19, it is pencil heightened with white on paper. The Annunciation. Here we see the profound and confused look on Mary's face as the angel comes to her telling her what her fate will be. Detail. The Annunciation. Found. The subject of the painting is the plight of the fallen woman, a common theme in Victorian novels, poems, and plays. The woman, with her face to the wall, has come to the city to make her fortune. Failing to support herself, which was a very common occurrence, She has been degraded into prostitution. The farmer bringing his calf to market finds his former fiancée and tries to reclaim her, but she responds in the words of the Rossetti poem on the painting, "Leave me, I do not know you, go away." Beata Beatrix, painted as a memorial to Rossetti's first wife, Elizabeth Siddal, who died in 1862. Rossetti had in fact begun the picture many years before, but took it up again in 1864 and completed it by 1870. It is one of his most intensively visionary pictures, symbolistic, and marks a new direction in his art. It represents the death of Beatrice in Dante's Vita Nuova. Beatrice sits in a death-like trance, while a bird, the messenger of death, drops a poppy into her hands. In the background, the figures of Love and Dante gaze at each other. Detail of Beata Beatrix. Veronica Veronese. Rossetti described this picture the following way. The girl is in a sort of passionate reverie, and is drawing her hand listlessly along the strings of a violin, which hangs against the wall, while she holds the bow with the other hand, as if arrested by the thought of the moment when she is about to play. In color, I shall make the picture a study of varied greens. A sea spell. Rossetti immortalized the women he loved by creating a new ideal of feminine beauty. Remote yet alluring, they flaunted untamed tresses and bodies unfeathered by either Victorian corsets or Victorian standards of doll-like prettiness. The three greatest loves of Rossetti's life, his auburn-haired wife, his voluptuous blonde mistress, and his raven-haired lover, all look completely different, and he portrayed them all faithfully. Nonetheless, a distinctive type of pre-Raphaelite woman emerged from his paintings and established an unorthodox new female ideal. Sibylla Palmafira, or Soul's Beauty. From Rossetti's House of Life, there's a sonnet which identifies the painting subject. This is that Lady Beauty, in whose praise thy voice and hand shake still, long known to thee by flying hair and fluttering hem, the beat following her daily of the heart and feet. How passionately and irretrievably, in what found flight, how many ways and days. Lady Lilith. When Rossetti wanted some information about Lilith, the character from medieval lore, a friend wrote and said, Lilith, about whom you ask for information, was evidently the first strong-minded woman and the original advocate of woman's rights. Rossetti had begun Lady Lilith in 1864 and finished it in 1868. Detail, Lady Lilith. According to rabbinic legend, Lilith was Adam's first wife, a seductress and a demon woman who gave birth only to devils and who wanted equal rights in everything. Her sensuality is accented by the outstretched golden hair. which is referred to in the lines from Faust, which go, "Beware of her hair, for she excels all women in the magic of her locks, and when she twines them around a young man's neck, she will not ever set him free again." Reverie. The picture on the left is called Reverie. The smaller insert picture on the right is the model Jane Morris, who had an unhappy love affair with her husband and then turned to Rossetti and used her for numerous pictures as a model and became obsessed with her. And you can see the likenesses that he was able to transform into his painting. Astarte Cyracea, one of the largest and most extraordinary of all Rossetti's pictures of Jane Morris. She is portrayed as Venus Astarte, with two torch-bearing attendants, in a composition full of tension and mannerism, glowing with deep and mysterious colors. This is the very epitome of Rossetti's pre-Raphaelite love goddesses, and Rossetti wrote a poem describing it, which ends, "That face of love's all-penetrative spell, amulet, talisman, and oracle, betwixt the sun and moon, a mystery." The Daydream. Jane Morris again posed for this picture. And while Morris was with Rossetti at Aldrich Lodge, she discovered the extent of his addiction to chloral. Soon after that discovery that Jenny Morris, her older daughter, had epilepsy, brought Jane and her husband closer together. The next year, Rossetti had a second breakdown. He recovered, but it had become evident that he and Jane Morris could have no future together. Their friendship continued, as did their correspondence, but it became more affectionate than passionate. Rossetti wrote, expressing his deep regard for you, a feeling that far deeper, though I know you have never believed me, than I have entertained towards any other living creature at any time of my life. Later on, after his death, Jane Morris was asked whether she had been very much in love with Rossetti. She said yes at first, but it did not last long. It was very warm while it lasted. When I found that he was ruining himself with chloral, and that I could do nothing to prevent it, I left going off to him on account of the children. If you had known him, she said, you would have loved him, and he would have loved you. All were devoted to him who knew him. He was unlike all other men. Joseph Millard William Turner, 1775 to 1851. Greatest of landscape painters. Son of a barber, he began as a watercolorist, traveling the countryside for material. By the time he began to exhibit oils, he was starting his worldwide travels of Europe, always busy with a sketchbook and keenly observant of every effect in nature, dawn and dusk, sea and cloud, sun and storm. There resulted the prodigious quantity and variety of his work, in which his genius consistently expanded until the end of his life. Remarkable was his ability to convert air and solid matter into dynamic movement and force, such as seen in rain, steam, and speed. The art of Turner is a constant astonishment in its numerous facets, romantic, sometimes impressionistic in atmospheric color, yet expressionist or abstract watercolors which match his oils in exquisite things, detailed study of birds or fish, numerous sketch books that demand exploration, and even portrait surprises. A true innovator and art genius. Self-portrait. Turner painted only 2 self-portraits and exhibited neither of them. He generally had no illusions about his unprepossessing appearance, although in this dandified portrayal, done when he was about 23, he may have succumbed to a bit of self-flattery. Calais Pier. Turner's lifelong passion for the sea is revealed in this picture, a realistic drama of the restless ocean and the men who dare battle it. Where many artists would have portrayed even a stormy sea as dark green or blue, he made the waves peak and swell in a white froth of fury. When he was crossing the Channel on his way to Paris in 1802, a storm prevented the landing of his packet. Turner managed to get ashore in a smaller boat and stood on the pier, sketching the progress of the packet fighting its way in. Crossing the Brook. Turner has imbued his painting with a romantic haze. He exaggerated the framework of the trees, creating an imbalance by heightening those at the left until they gush like spumes of water from a fountain. Snowstorm. Hannibal and his army crossing the Alps. By custom, painters arranged historical and mythological scenes in horizontal and vertical planes that yielded a foreground, middle ground, and background. To achieve the dramatic effect, Turner substituted the circular swirl of a storm for the traditional verticals and horizontals. The soldiers, barely seen at the bottom of the picture, interrupted in their plundering of a mountain village by the storm, cringe beneath its fury. Here Turner has repeated one of his favorite themes, men humbled by nature. Rain, steam, and speed. The Great Western Railway. One day, when Turner was riding a train during a violent rainstorm, he thrust his head out a window and sat for fully 10 minutes watching the engine race through the downpour. In transcribing his impressions to canvas later, he created one of his most powerful and best-known paintings. To convey the sense of speed, Turner showed the train tracks receding sharply into the distance and racing off the corner of the canvas in the right foreground. The train itself is a streak of movement, with only the black smokestack defined as a focal point. The major force of the painting, however, is the rain that sweeps across the entire canvas, blurring machine, tracks, and trestle into a landscape of motion and mood. Shade and Darkness, The Evening of the Deluge. Turner constantly sought new ways to bring his personal visions to life through color. In 2 of his late paintings, one shown here, he used elements from the Bible as his subjects and interpreted them using a translated theory of color. In Shade and Darkness, pairs of animals file through the rain toward Noah's Ark, a vague shadow at the center of the painting. The colors, which are called minus colors, blues, greens, and purples, which is the theory represented, restlessness and anxious impressions. In Turner's circular composition, in which a flight of birds describes an arc over the scene, these colors form a tunnel toward the light at the center, drawing the viewer into the vertex. Light and Color, The Morning After the Deluge. This is a companion piece to the previous picture, Shade and Darkness, The Evening of the Deluge. Turner painted this picture with plus colors, the reds, yellows, and greens, associated with warmth, happiness, and gaiety. In this picture, the sun has burst forth after the rains. The earth is a green outcropping from which a serpent uncoils. Amid the swirling light, a beardless Moses, writing the book of Genesis on a tablet, materializes at the upper center. In contrast to Shade and Darkness, the colors seem to fly outward, carrying the center of the painting toward the viewer. The Fighting Temeraire tugged to her last berth. Detail. Late on a summer day in 1838, standing at the rail of a fast new streamliner that plied the Thames River between London and Margate, Turner beheld a sight that was to inspire his best-known work. Moving majestically upstream was the old warship Temeraire. Every Englishman knew her history. She had fought under Nelson at the Battle of the Nile in 1798. 7 years later, with all the daring her name implied, she had notably served England's cause at Trafalgar. In the Temeraire, second in the fleet's line of battle, had gone the glory of avenging Nelson's death, blasting the enemy vessel that had raked his flagship Victory. Now, after 33 more years, the Temeraire was on a final mission of destruction, her own. Stripped of her sails and 98 guns, her hull rotting beneath a last perfunctory coat of paint, she was en route from the naval base at Sheerness to a private wrecker's shipyard, to be broken up for her heart of oak timbers and copper fittings. 2 sturdy steam tugs, belching smoke and soot, guided her. Above the agents of this new age of speed, the Temeraire loomed tall and still proud, taking the salute of a brilliant setting sun, going to her doom with a queen's grace. The Pre-Raphaelites. The Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood was formed by a group of rebellious young English artists in 1848 as a reaction against what they saw as the abuses and excesses of the art of their day. They created an entirely new style of painting that looked back to the romance of medieval chivalry and also documented contemporary Victorian social themes with a painstaking technique that demanded the closest possible attention to naturalistic detail. The revolutionary nature of these pictures resulted in repeated and often violent attacks from such critics as Charles Dickens, and within 5 years the original Brotherhood was disbanded. However, the aspirations, the techniques, and the striking and often beautiful paintings of the Pre-Raphaelites survived to influence and inspire artists during the remaining years of the 19th century and even into the early part of the 20th century. We have seen through Rossetti some of the paintings of the Pre-Raphaelites. Here we're going to take just the paintings without the commentaries to give you an idea of what this type of work consisted of. One thing that you will notice is that the colors are very bright. The pictures tend to be very beautiful. And the women in the pictures tend to have a reddish tinge of hair, from a light red to a dark red. This was a trademark of the Pre-Raphaelite women. And even in the movie Batman Returns, one of the characters went back to look at some of these pictures to get the type of hair color that she wanted for the picture. Today, the Pre-Raphaelites seem to have regained popularity. and have been rediscovered again and have become very popular in themes of literature, in movies, and in museums. And the revival seems to be getting stronger. So this is an opportunity to see the various types of work of the Pre-Raphaelites. The Bridesmaid, Sir John Everett Millais. Isabella, Sir John Everett Millais. Claudio and Isabella, William Holman Hunt. Mariana, Sir John Everett Millais. Ophelia, Sir John Everett Millais. The Awakening Conscience, William Holman Hunt. Christ Washing Peter's Feet, Ford Madox Brown. The Pretty Ba Lambs, Ford Madox Brown. The Study for April Love at the left, and the picture itself, April Love, Arthur Hughes. Titian's First Essay in Color, William Dyce. The Wounded Cavalier, William Shakespeare Burton. The Talking Oak, William Maw Egley. The Doubt, Can These Dry Bones Live? Henry Alexander Bowler. Hesperus, Sir Joseph Noel Paton. A Study in March, in Early Spring, John William Inchbold. Isabella and the Pot of Basil, William Holman Hunt. The Shadow of Death, William Holman Hunt. Queen Guinevere, William Morris. The Beguiling of Merlin, Sir Edward Burne-Jones. The Baleful Head, Sir William Burne-Jones. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, preserved from the burning fiery furnace, Simeon Solomon. Chivalry, Sir Frank Dixie. I am half sick of shadows, said the Lady of Shalott, Sidney Harold Metyard. The Lady of Shalott, John William Waterhouse. Hylas and the Nymphs, John William Waterhouse. Ophelia, John William Waterhouse. The Child Enthroned, Thomas Cooper Gotch. La Belle Dame Sans Merci, Frank Cadogan Cowper. The Mirror of Venus, Sir Edward Burne-Jones. With the study of Impressionism and Post-Impressionism, we will see how art has been taken into the modern era. A painter by the name of Gustave Courbet wanted to paint a more aggressive attitude towards the subjects chosen from the life of the lower classes. Courbet insisted that he wished only to paint the life of his own times in the costumes of the day, and that toward such an end he studied without prejudice the art of the old and modern masters. But to the public which believed that only the ideal or imaginary subject was suitable for such important paintings, Courbet's insistence that he could not paint an angel because he had never seen one sounded blasphemous. To define such paintings of everyday life and of landscapes interpreted without sentimentality, a leading modern critic has introduced the term naturalism. In naturalistic art, the artist portrays only objects and situations which he has seen and experienced himself. The climax of this naturalistic movement was reached with the work of Edouard Manet and the Impressionists. Although the term Impressionism was first used in 1874 by a journalist ridiculing a landscape by Claude Monet called Impressionism Sunrise, the beginning of the bitter controversy which raged for 20 years over the merits of Impressionism appeared 10 years early at a showing at one of the salons in France. The salons were the government's way of exhibiting art by the famous artists of the time. This exhibition received its name because the works rejected by the jury for the salon that year were so numerous and the artists' protests so vigorous that the government was obliged to hold a separate exhibition of the rejected paintings, and this salon was called Salon des Refuses. Here Monet shocked the public with his portrait of a nude woman and two men seated in a wood. Like Courbet, Monet had tried to combine the modern subject with an earlier design, for the composition and even the theme were derived from 16th century Italian art, but Monet's refusal to idolize the figures or to minimize the contemporary character of the event was offensive to many. 2 years later, his Olympia, another frank treatment of the nude, again aroused protest. In viewing his Dead Christ with Angels, we can still sense something of the public's bewilderment, for here the nude is treated with all the power of Monet's searching vision, but without a shred of religious mysticism or idealism. Had he wished, Monet might have urged that there were precedents for his vision, and even for his technique in such earlier realists as Hals, Velázquez, and Goya, on whom he certainly relied more than once for inspiration. From the middle of the 1860s, such painters as Claude Monet, Edward Degas, Camille Pissarro, and Auguste Renoir followed Monet's lead in depicting scenes of contemporary life and landscape. Their desire for a more modern expression led them to prize the immediacy of visual impression and persuaded landscapists, especially Monet and Pissarro, to work out of doors. From this custom of painting directly from nature came the spontaneous revelation of atmosphere and climate characteristic of Impressionist painting. Their rejection of idealistic interpretation and of literary antidote was paralleled by their scrutiny of color and light. They held 8 cooperative exhibitions between 1874 and 1886, and they usually irritated the public. But their technique was actually less radical than it seemed at the time. In certain respects, they were merely developing the color theories of Leonardo da Vinci and the actual practice of Rubens, Constable, and Turner and Delacroix. The Impressionists sought to create the illusion of forms bathed in light and atmosphere. This required an intensive study of light as the source of our experience of color. The Impressionists revealed the important visual truth that local color, the actual color of the object, is usually modified by the quality of the light in which it is seen and by reflections from other objects and modifications produced by juxtaposed colors. Complementary colors, for example, if used side by side in large enough areas, intensify each other. In small quantities, though, or mixed, they fuse into a neutral tone. Shadows are not gray or black, as earlier painters had thought, but are composed of colors complementary to the hue of the object casting the shadow, if not modified by reflections or other conditions. Furthermore, the juxtaposition of colors on the canvas for the eye to fuse at a distance produces a more intense hue than the mixing of the same colors on the palette. Although it is not strictly true that the Impressionists separated the primary hues, such as blue and yellow, and juxtaposed them to create green, they achieved remarkably brilliant effects with their characteristically short, choppy brush strokes, which so accurately caught the vibrating quality of light. The fact that at close range the surfaces of their canvases looked unintelligible, and that forms and objects appear only when the eye fuses the strokes at a certain distance, accounts for much of the adverse criticism which they had first received. Although such landscapes are the most strictly impressionistic work of the group, the figure paintings of Renoir and Degas, and those executed by Monet in the last decade of his life, are revelations of the beauty and interest in everyday surroundings. Indeed, never before or since have the pastimes of the middle classes been portrayed with so much sympathy and charm as by the Impressionist masters in the 1870s and 80s. In the works of Henry de Toulouse-Lautrec, who deeply admired Degas, the old master's cool scrutiny of contemporary life was transformed into more of satire and deft character analysis. And as times went on, by 1886 the Impressionist painters were accepted as serious artists by most of the critics and by a large portion of the public. But just at the time when their gay and colorful studies of contemporary life no longer seemed crude or unfinished, the painters themselves and a group of younger followers came to feel that too many of the traditional elements of picture making were being neglected in the search for momentary sensations of light and color. Groups of men such as Seurat, Cezanne, Van Gogh, and Gauguin looked at it in a different light. They looked at a more systematic examination of the properties of three-dimensional space, of the expressive qualities of line, pattern, and color, and of the symbolic character of subject matter. Impressionism, although each painter had at first accepted the Impressionist method and never rejected the new and brighter palette, these people have become known as the Post-Impressionists, a term which signifies simply their chronological position in 19th century French painting. Without a sound understanding of the individual styles and achievements, it would be impossible to comprehend fully the art of the 20th century. So as we go into our study of Impressionism and Post-Impressionism, you will see different styles, methods, subject matter, and you'll learn to recognize the artist by their various techniques. Some of the paintings you might admire, and some of them you may dislike. But an overall impression of Impressionism is usually favorable in today's society, and these Impressionists and Post-Impressionists have been accepted as much as great masters as were people like Rubens and Rembrandt. Starting with Impressionism, we are going to take 5 artists that are considered probably the forerunners of Impressionism. They are going to include Degas, Monet, Morisset, Monet, and Renoir. Now, it would be a mistake to think that these painters only painted one certain way, called Impressionism. But as they got along with their careers, they also changed their styles and methods and went into different variations. And we'll see those that follow these five. The Post-Impressionists started out with Impressionism and then put their own style and format into their painting and took it into a new direction. Edward Degas, 1834 to 1917, is a painter and graphic artist who came from a well-to-do family, the son of a banker. He devoted himself to contemporary life and portraiture. His subject matter included the daily lives of ballet dancers, opera musicians, and jockeys, developing a novel kind of composition based on angles of view unusual at the time. Later on, he concentrated on the study of women. He delighted in using various forms of media, though it was pastels that produced his most brilliant effects with color. Failing eyesight turned him to sculpture, which he called blind man's art. He produced great works of beauty. While he is often termed an impressionist, he was in many ways quite distinct from that group. He had no great interest in landscape or in painting direct form nature. Self-portrait with charcoal holder. Degas painted most of his self-portraits before he was 25 and a professional. He usually portrayed himself as serious. The dance foyer at the Opera Rue Les Pelletiers. Although the dancers are individualized, Degas has woven them together in an ensemble with a characteristic empty space and concern for the organization of the picture as a whole. Interior, or The Rape. Sometimes Degas came near telling stories of contemporary life. Here it is thought he recreates a scene from a novel. The newly married couple arrive at a hotel, and the woman weeps, saying, "You suffer, for you love me, and I cannot be yours." Another interpretation is that the man shows a brutal nature and plans to have his way with her. What do you think? Notice how Degas separates the two characters by almost the whole space of the room, and how the prettiness of the wallpaper and touches of white give additional pathos to the kneeling girl. Notice also the use of light. Rehearsal of a ballet on stage. It is characteristic of Degas, and perhaps modern sensibility, which he did much to shape, that one can accept simultaneously in this picture the glamorized light and delicate dresses, together with a dancer scratching her back as if unobserved, and others yawning and stretching. Degas has made skillful use of a large empty space at the front of the stage. Café, concert at the Ambassadeurs. As so often, Degas has depicted the contrast between the brilliant lighting of the stage and the more softly illuminated auditorium. At first the audience may appear a confused jumble, but notice how the eye is led to the main singer on stage by the top of the bass viol, in her bright red dress, how the blue dress of another singer is echoed by the blue hat in the audience, and how the rectangle of pillars on stage is repeated by the rectangle of the orchestra pit. Miss Lola at the Cirque Fernando. Degas's taste for movement at a crucial point drew him to the circus. Miss Lola is being drawn up to the roof by means of a rope held between her teeth. The girders of the roof repeat the angle of her limbs. Miss Lola at the Cirque Fernando study. Here we see how Degas had planned out his picture and how through the foreshortening with perspective he was able to get the right proportion. Again, you can see the square method used even by some of the greatest of artists to make sure that their portion is correct. Because Degas is known so well for his paintings of ballet and opera, I'm going to show you several pictures, and as you look at them, you make your comments to the instructor as what you like or don't like, what strikes the eye, color combinations, composition of the picture, of how the dancers or the people may be lined up. What is appealing? Why are these so popular? This one entitled Four Dancers. Blue Dancers. Ballet Dancers in the Wings. Dancers, Pink and Green. Dance Class with Mademoiselle Morante. Notice when you look at this picture how everything seems to be very clear. That as you look at certain objects you can pick them out. But in a moment I'm going to show you a detail, and you're going to be able to see that through a series of brush strokes and the use of light that it gives you an impression. And so what you're seeing here are all those kind of strokes and uses of light that give you an impression of a picture, and it seems clearer than it really is. But as you'll see in the detail and get close up, it looks more confused. Detail of Mademoiselle Morante's dance class. Look how the strokes on her ballet dress don't even look like a dress on the bottom. They're just brush marks. Look at the window to the right. Again, brush marks and lighter color to give the impression of window and light. Singer in Green. Do you like the picture? What about the color combination? Is it something that's appealing or something that's ugly? Singer with a glove. What catches your eye in this picture? How is light used? How is light used in the colors on her skin or her dress? What about the black? The garland type look around her neck and elbow and the black glove. Do they add or distract from the picture? What about the lines running up and down in the background, the different colors? Do they help offset the singer or distract from her. Now we will take a look at several of the pictures that Degas spent the latter part of his life in the study of women. This one, called Absinthe. For this picture, Degas posed two of his friends, an engraver and an actress, on the terrace of a cafe which, after the Franco-Prussian War, was the new rendezvous point for artists who later became the Impressionists. When it was shown in London in 1893, it caused a scandal, and the old owner sold it. Toulouse-Lautrec and Picasso, who we'll see later, were attracted to it. The theme is treated coolly and objectively, and the main interest seems reserved for the zigzagging lines which began at the bottom of the canvas and the off-center position of the figures, one of which is cut by the frame. This kind of design may owe something to Degas' study of Japanese prints. The fear that was caused by this shown by the woman in a stupor, more in a degrading type of position. The Tub. Degas did many such scenes of women. The view from above of a body straining in purposeful movement. Public thought such pictures were ugly. Picasso's early work is influenced by the blue tint. Woman combing her hair. The brush strokes go up and down. There aren't very many colors in the picture. The body of the woman is drawn anatomically correct, and again, it's taken from a scene of life where a woman is preparing herself. As was stated before, the public wasn't much interested in such pictures, but through the years they have gained popularity. Later we'll see Renoir does many of the same type of pictures. Another picture, called Woman Combing Her Hair, shows the later work of Degas. His style is now changing. His strokes are more broader and freer, and he uses the use of acid colors, and is one of his good examples of his work with pastels. Little dancer at age 14. As we said in his opening biography, Degas started to go blind later in life and turned to doing sculpture work. And here we can see an example of his work. This is a photograph of Edgar Degas in his old age in 1915, 2 years before his death. Edouard Manet, 1832 to 1883, French painter and outstanding figure in the 19th century. His father, a prominent official in the Ministry of Justice, wanted him to study law, but he wanted to study art. He joined the Navy but flunked the entrance exam for the Naval Training School. He was finally permitted to study art. He went to art school but learned more by the study of Velázquez, Goya, Rembrandt, Titian at the Louvre. Though traditional and conservative in his desire to be accepted by the Salon, her early exhibition sponsored by the Association of Artists in Paris, Manet soon found himself a hero of the young artist. He did get to exhibit several paintings, but they were received with derision and anger by critics and the public, who objected to Manet's frank treatment of female nudity, his supposed irreverence towards ancient and honored themes, and his fresh direct color and brushstrokes. The controversy of these paintings only enhanced Manet's standing among poets, critics, and artists of the avant-garde, such as Monet and Degas. Even as a leading figure for the younger generation of Impressionist painters, The elegant, sophisticated Manet remained supremely independent and never exhibited with the group, preferring to take his dim chances with the Salon. He was, however, closely associated with several members of the Impressionist circle, and was deeply influenced by their sparkling, light-filled canvases, especially those of Claude Monet and Berthe Morisset, who became his sister-in-law. In his later years, Manet painted more intimate and casual landscapes, portraits, street and cafe scenes, and still life, but with a sure feeling for structure and immediacy for which he was always known. Luncheon on the Grass, or the Picnic. This painting has provoked endless comment. It is one of Manet's most well-known, but not one of his best. The men appear to be a little stiff, and the hand holding the cane is clumsily painted. Manet was sitting on a river bank with a friend, and he said, "Well, I suppose I have to paint a nude." He then conceived this picture. The critics and public were upset to see a nude woman seating with two fully clad art students. Manet's name was on the lips of everyone in Paris. Olympia. When this painting was accepted by the Salon of Paris, it took 2 guards to protect it from an indignant crowd. The work caused an uproar. It is one of the finest symphonies in white in the whole of art. It seems so fresh that it might have been painted only yesterday. The press was unsparing. They said, "This wretched little woman displays her unattractive form, enclosed in stiff outlines that look like they were traced in soot." Crowds formed that the army couldn't disperse. It made Manet famous, and it now hangs in the Louvre. The Dead Toreador. This is one of Manet's most sensitive and delicate works. Although the body is perhaps a little wooden or stiff, the color harmonies reveal Manet as a master colorist. The Fifer. This was Manet's first work that he flooded the canvas with light. The monumental simplicity which delights us today shocked the adherents of the traditional school. It was to them too plain and simple. But one critic wrote, "I do not think it is possible to achieve a more forceful effect with such uncomplicated means." Gare Saint-Lazare. The scene takes place by a train stop. This picture is a well-observed slice of reality. The tone is exquisitely light, and the little girl's blue bow is a marvel of art. The most admirable thing of all is that we do not see the train that the child is watching with such evident delight. The Tipsy Woman. One of his finest works. There is a dazed feeling about the painting. The style is bold and with some very delicate touches, for example in the hand holding a cigarette. The palette is a subtle harmony of mauves and pinks. Manet has depicted all the sadness and discouragement and emptiness of the soul of the disappointed, solitary woman. It shows Manet's gift for suggesting the inward reality by painting the outward appearance. Compare this to Degas's woman sitting in the cafe. Argenteuil. With its golden tonality bathed in light, this canvas is without doubt Manet's sunniest painting. Everything in the picture pulsates with a fullness of life. This is the miracle of the open air and the zenith of Manet's incomparable touch. Each detail, the village trailing away in the distance, the river banks, the trees, the brick and stone houses, the Seine river, the play of light and textures in the clothing, and the figures carved, it would seem, out of the heat of the day, contributes to make this Manet's greatest outdoor painting. But Manet was a rebel and kind of set himself up as the official exponent of outdoor color, and he was decried more than ever by the critics. They weren't used to this brightness and the use of light. Repose, Berthe Morisset. Manet had imparted the spirit of modernism and the faith of Berthe Morisset, his sister-in-law. He was to paint her often, in a black hat, almost smiling, fascinating under a veil of mourning, or mysterious, her face hidden behind a fan, and here seated on a divan at ease with her arms flung out. When the critics talked about the Morisset girls, they would say that they are charming, it is a pity they are not men. However, as women they could further the cause of art by each marrying an academician and stirring up trouble in the camp with his old fogies. But Berthe was to do better than that. She was to become one of the most sensitive and important painters of the century. But when this was displayed, the critics were not kind. The portrait, which elevates the particular characteristics of the individual to the universal image of a woman resting, was the butt of numerous jests. One such critic wrote, "This slut in a white skirt flopping on a couch might be sleeping off her wine." Nonetheless, this painting was an inspiration to other painters who followed the broad lines that were represented in it. The Dead Christ with Angels. This is one of the rare religious paintings by Manet, and also one of the very few produced in this time period. He once said, "There is one thing that I have always wanted to do, and that is to paint a crucifixion. Christ on the cross. What a wonderful symbol. You can go on searching until the end of time, but you'll never find anything like it." Well, we don't know if he painted any crucifixion, but he did paint a scene of Christ scourged, and this one. The picture is painted in a somber tonality of funeral blacks and whites, set off in the Spanish manner by browns and blues. A friend of his wrote, when the picture was to be exhibited in 1864, "It seemed that the spear was driven into the right side. Manet had painted the wound on the left. You will have to change the place of the wound before opening. Look it up in the Gospels, and don't have malicious people making fun of you." And yet the critics called it a figure of Christ. The pallor of death is smudged by dirty black shadows. Monet painting in his studio boat. This is the boat on which Monet used at Argenteuil when he painted there and lived. The work, executed rapidly and signed on the boat, raises a historic question whether Manet or Monet was the first to paint outdoor pictures in the Impressionist sense of the term, with the full light of the day. The story goes that Monet was very short of money and was obliged to ask for help. He says, "Here I am without a cent." So he wrote to Manet asking for a loan of 50 francs one day and 20 francs another. He says, "I have got into the hands of a bailiff who will cause me a lot of trouble. He has given me until midday." Manet was very generous as usual and loaned him the money. And he also in his studio placed his friends' canvases in good light, being anxious to find buyers for them and not troubling about his own. Claude Monet's pictures enjoyed his special favor at these exhibitions. Monet worked on this old boat, which he had bought second-hand. He rowed or punted it along the river, and stopped as the fancy took him. His wife cooked simple meals, and the couple entertained friends on board. Claude Monet, 1840 to 1926, French painter and leader of the Impressionists. He went from boyish caricature to open-air landscape painting. He was associated and was influenced by the likes of Manet, Renoir, Sisley, and Turner. His Impressionism, in the exhibition of 1874, in which he and his friends appeared as a fairly homogeneous group, brought the term Impressionism into currency for the first time. There seems to be an optical law by which contours are dissolved and colors appear constantly changing, captured only by fleeting touches or dots playing over the entire picture area, which are seen as forms in the eye of the beholder. This is the basis of Impressionism and painting according to Monet's concern. He did several studies on how different effects of light affected the same subject. Monet pursued his goal of completely dissolving the elements in the structure of his pictures, particularly water, his favorite subject. His last works, giant canvases filled with nothing but water, flowers, and sky in varying degrees of sunlight, which led a critic to call them the most beautiful hymns to the universal nothingness. Women in the Garden. Monet recorded the true effect of outdoor light on the figure. Its composition is meticulously ordered, and the treatment of the figures in ornamented gowns as pastel silhouettes set off a nuclei of bright colors. The design is beautifully coordinated by a series of ovals which swing around the lap of the seated figure, and the red-haired figure at the right, as she moves around the central axis provided by the tree trunk, defines a similar curve in depth. Terrace at the Seaside, Saint Adresse. The group is dominated by the father figure. Combined with a downward-looking view and the structural emphasis provided by the flags and the balustrade, the angular position of his rustic chair sets him apart from the other plain figures. Madame Monet in Japanese costume. This is a total break from the principles that usually govern Monet's work. His wife's face is used on the figure. Rue Montorgueil, decked out with flags. Impressionism was an art of movement as well as light and color. In the interlacing sun and shadow, the windows, awnings, balconies, sidewalk, stands, passing figures, and flying flags fill both the street and air above. Sunflowers. By means of heavy intertwining strokes of rich pigment, the great blossoms are made to glow symbolically before their contemporary background, while the leaves gesture like tongues of flame. Because of the masterful pattern of the golden ovals, the effect is as decorative as it is expressive. Lady with a parasol. The light falls from the right against the line of the leg. The clouds also move from right to left, and the parasol figure and rapidly sketched veil point out the lateral wind and sun direction like a weather vane. Rouen Cathedral, the facade at sunset. Monet painted a renowned series of the cathedral at Rouen, seen under different light effects. This is one of that series. Rocks at Belle Isle. In transferring the scene to canvas, Monet conformed closely to the relative positions of the dark patterns against the churning sea, and their opposition to the stark horizon, but increased the chromatic variety of the blue, green, and violet water, and its reflections on the violet rocks. And he dramatized their flame-like movement in harmony with the rhythm of the waves. Lady in the Garden at St. Adresse. We see the light pouring in from the left side as it lights up the trees and produces shadows to their right. The woman in white standing with the parasol stands out in the picture because of the brightness of her dress, and it almost seems as though the parasol itself is illuminated, which draws attention to the head of that woman. Branch of the Seine near Giverny. Monet's style, like that of most innovating artists, evolved as he grew older. Because he submitted more completely than any other impressionist to the caprices of nature, no tendency became so ingrained that its direction could not be altered by the next motif. So here he tries another style. Here he almost abandons impressionism because the broken brushstrokes are not evident, and he has employed an almost square shape, a shape not common in the history of painting. And because of this, the painting is endued with an intrinsic motionlessness. Except for the slightest swell, no movement disturbs the silence. The mood is mysterious and meditative, an introduction to the mood of the water landscapes which will occupy his last years. The Garden, Giverny. Monet said, "I perhaps owe having become a painter to flowers." Their importance in his life was close to that of his profession. Indeed, the two can hardly be separated. Whenever he became established in one place long enough, gardening was the outdoor activity that complemented painting. He said, "My garden is a slow work and pursued with love," he told one of his visitors, "and I do not deny that I am proud of it. 40 years ago, when I established myself there was nothing but a farmhouse and a poor orchard. I bought the house, and little by little I enlarged and organized it. I dug, planted, weeded myself. In the evening the children watered. Later the water garden was added, and these responsibilities were divided among 5 gardeners. The house of green and soft pink can be glimpsed at the center. Its architecture is echoed in the foliage, the beds, and the violet shadows on the path, by horizontals and verticals. Reinforced by the roughly pigmented surface, they break the sharp perspective recession, give tangibility to a volume that might have looked too hollow, and faultlessly adjust the luxuriant profession to its almost square frame. Water Garden at Giverny. In 1890, Monet bought a strip of marshland that lay across the road from his flower garden. And over the years, he planted weeping willows, iris, bamboo were planted near the pool, along the fence that enclosed it, roses, and on the water, several varieties of water lilies. He painted this picture many times, and each time he would change his version of it. Slowly, he would take away a sky in the horizon or the banks that would surround it. And he said, "I have attempted to employ this theme of water lilies in the decoration of a salon. Carried along its wall, its unity enfolding all the panels, would have given the illusion of an endless hole of water, without horizon or bank. Nerves tense from work would be relaxed there, and to him who lived there, this room would have offered the refuge of a peaceful meditation in the center of a flowering aquarium." Woman with a Parasol, Madame Monet and her son. Here is another picture he painted of a woman with a parasol, his own wife and child. And in this you can really see the impressionistic strokes. Painted at an angle, we are looking up a hill, and in the background we see the light flowing in from behind the clouds. With just a smattering of brush strokes, it gives the illusion of a sky that's full of light and creates shadows on the grasses beneath the figures. The pond at Montgeron. In the middle distance we can see the source of light that barely creeps its way into this peaceful setting. In the upper right hand corner you can barely see a person fishing. These were the type of tranquil places that Monet found such solace, and much of his creative abilities came forth. White water lilies. In this painting, Monet uses a primary color of green with touches of blue to give a different type of effect. Although this isn't probably how this scene really looked, so much is added by overemphasis on the color green. Waterloo Bridge, the effect of mist. This reminds us of the type of painting that the English painter Turner would have done. A bridge covered with mist, and yet we can see motion and movement with the boats that are going underneath the bridge, and the city in the background with the smoke curling from the large smokestacks. Done in very pale colors, gives almost an eerie look to the picture. Luncheon on the Grass. This reminds us somewhat of Manet's portrait of the picnic, only it was far less controversial. All the people in this picture have their clothes on, and yet through this picture you can see the impressionist use of light, how it comes from behind the trees in the upper left and comes through and shines on the individuals as they're seated beneath that big tree surrounding the picnic blanket. The white seems to bounce off of the shoulders of those standing and on the white dresses of those in the middle. The big tree trunk on the right shows also light hitting that and being illuminated. The bridge at Argenteuil. This picture is more defined. We can see basically everything that's in the picture. The bridge, the house in the background, sailboat in the back, and one that's moored off the shore in the front. But again, light fills the picture from the clouds up above to the reflection of the shimmering water below. Water lilies. Lonely and discouraged after the death of his first wife, Monet all but gave up painting. To add to this, a cataract was forming over one eye. His friends persuaded him to continue. The result was the idea of combining a group of water landscapes to form a huge, complete, and encompassing environment. This is a picture of a gallery room in a museum in Paris that shows the water landscapes of Monet, and this is the first room of that building. Photograph of Monet about 1926, or the year of his death. Monet in his large mural studio about 1920.